Hello there, Marshall here from Limited Resources, and we're doing another depth check video here. This is, of course, where we go deep on draft. We zoom in on some interesting aspect of a booster draft while bringing you the story of this particular draft. Let's take a look at our Pack 1 Pick 1, where we've got Lothnu Hellion, which is a decent aggro card, but a much better red card right next to it with Harnessed Lightning. Also in the pack, there's a Servant of the Conduit, which is a good performing card, and a Hunt the Weak, which is decent. I think Harnessed Lightning is a pretty easy pick here. This is the type of card that you'd love to see early on as it goes potentially into multiple archetypes, and it's one of the premium removal spells for the set, which makes it fantastic. So let's take Harnessed Lightning. Ooh, this is a good pack. Two good cards right here, Restoration Gearsmith and Skywhaler Shot. We'll also note that the rare is missing from the pack. There's no good red cards in the set. In the pack. Salivating Gremlins and Terror of the Fairgrounds are both very mediocre to bad. So we won't be taking a red card. So with that said, I do think it's between these two cards. And I think Restoration Gearsmith is the most powerful card outright in the pack. But I think the card that gives us the highest win percent chance is Skywhaler Shot, because we're much more likely to play it in our deck. It's hard to play these two colors plus this color. So we're kind of choosing between the two, where if we take the shot, we could just be red-white. So we'll take that. All right, here's an Aetherborn Marauder and a Decoction module. There's also an Attune with Ether, which is a card I like quite a bit in the pack, and then the rest I don't like as much. Nice of Magic Online to put them in a row for me here. This gets kind of interesting. So the Decoction module goes best in an energy deck because it generates energy for you. So you want to have something to do with it. The Aetherborn Marauder goes best usually paired with green, which we're not, at least at this point. And then the Attune is kind of in the middle. The problem with the Attune, of course, being that it's a third color. But I'm actually going to take Attune with Ether here because I think that it keeps us the most open. And Decoction module is my least favorite of the modules. I think it's the weakest option of the three. And so I'm going to take Attune and see maybe if green's a little open or where we can go from there. All right, well, we've opened a decent, or we've been past, I should say, a decent colorless card here with Deadlock Trap. Colorless cards, of course, at a premium while you're deciding what colors you're in. And frankly, Emerald Bruiser is the only other card that really stands out to me, and it's fine, but a fourth color is not what we want, so I'll take the Trap. All right, so things are starting to become a little more clear now. Looks like black is open. We just saw two good black cards go by, Tidy Conclusion and the Emerald Bruiser. But we've got good options in our color, so I'm not going to shift over into black at least at this juncture. Era of Innovation is quite good, and same with Ether Torch Renegade. Renegade ended up being a bit overrated, and including by me. I generally think that pingers are very good in a format, but unfortunately, the Renegade didn't quite live up. Still, it's a good card, and it's playable, and it's an energy card, so I'm going to go ahead and take it here. Ooh, there's another energy card. There's also a Wild Wanderer, which would be a nice choice for us. If we end up being red-green energy, we could splash for a Skywhaler Shot or just open up a little bit of options. Electrostatic Pummeler is a card that's quite good at using energy, though it's very narrow, and it does need a lot of energy to be good. We've already got a pretty decent energy sync with Deadlock Trap and another one with Ether Torch Renegade, so I'm not super high on the Pummeler. I think I'm just going to take this Wild Wanderer and try to kind of spread our wings a little here. All right, Dubious Challenge is probably the worst card in the set, so we're not going to take that. I'm actually going to go ahead and just take this Ether Theorist. These are the three colors you want to be when you're energy, and we'll have to sort out what like if we end up being in blue at all, or if we end up splashing for this shot or whatever. All right, we've got a pretty bad pack here, a pair of Nimble Innovators. I'm just going to take the Hermit because it says energy on it. Here's the pack that we opened. I'm just going to take this Narnum Cobra. It's a pretty easy card to fit in the deck, and, you know, it does, if we do end up being green, it's okay. I'll take a Sage here, more energy. So we've got some good energy going and a little bit of the energy payoffs, but this deck is medium. These blue cards are just okay. This white card is excellent, and we can splash for it currently with an Attune and a Wild Wanderer. I think that, you know, our red cards are pretty good. Renegade's fine, and the Harness Lightning's excellent. So Probably want to lean in that direction over the 2 mediocre blue cards, but we'll see what this next pack brings us, because that could shift us for sure. All right, not much here. I'm just going to take Tezzeret's Ambition to add to our mediocre blue card count. All right. So we've got 3 green cards that are all medium. We've got 2 red cards that are pretty good. We've got 1 white card that's excellent. And yeah, so our deck is kind of somewhere in the middle, but it has potential if we pick up the right cards to be the big payoffs. Ooh, nice. It's funny because this is kind of an energy payoff card, but it's also just a good card in its own right and colorless. So it's an easy choice for us to take Multiform Wonder here. That's a nice open. What are we going to get back out of this pack? Probably nothing of note. Maybe a Thriving Turtle or something. I don't even know if we want that. There's a Dynavolt Tower. I suppose that could be an energy payoff for us. I think I'm just going to take this Pima Outrider. I just think it's a much better card. But, oh, actually, I could take Nature's Way. We've got plenty of creatures right now. I think this is actually a pretty close pick between Nature's Way and Pima Outrider. Nature's Way acting as a removal spell can be really powerful. But Pima Outrider is really one of the premier 4-drops. Yeah, I'll take the Nature's Way this time. All right, we've got an Attune with Ether, a Pima Outrider, and an Ether Hub. I'm going to take the Pima Outrider this time. Especially following up the Nature's Way pick. I wanted a Pima Outrider anyway, and it goes well with Nature's Way. So I'm just going to take it. What do we have here? Amalphus Doorbuster. That's a good one. Unlicensed Disintegration is awesome, but a little too far off of our colors. High Spire Artisan's like, meh, sure, you'll play it. And Spontaneous Artist is okay too, but I'm going to take the Doorbuster. All right, a Prophetic Prism or a Kujar Seed Sculptor. Looks like our choice here. Ballista Charger's fine. Durable Handicraft's kind of slow, but can be good in the right matchup. But I love these 2/2-drops. Again, currently we're red-green, and the Prism would be fine. Like, we've already got an Attune with Ether. I'm not super worried about the Sky Whaler shot. I do think the Seed Sculptor is a premium 2-drop in a deck like this. Yeah, I'm going to take it, actually. All right, well, this pack's bad. Wow, yeah, just nothing for us here at all. All right, I'll take a colorless card. All right, now we get Ether Hub and Attune with Ether again. So I'll take another Attune. And here's an Appetite. Spark of Creativity is pretty good too, but I think I'd rather just have an Appetite. It might make the main, it might be in the sideboard. All right, this is the pack we opened. Sure, more sideboard cards. All right, well, the Ether Hub came back, which is pretty cool. That means that the Sky Whaler shot is in. I guess it was going to be in anyway, but still, Ether Hub makes it just super easy for splashes. We could even open up our splash pretty significantly here with 2 Attunes and a Hub. We've got a lot of energy makers, so the Ether Hub is likely to make whatever color of mana we need whenever we need it. All right, a Spontaneous Artist is fine too, and another good source, or another good place to spend some energy. All right, the Durable Handicraft came back. That can be really powerful. We'll have to see how our playables count looks here. If we're going to main deck it or not. All right, I'm just going to take a Thriving Rhino here. Quicksmith Genius is fine too, but I think Thriving Rhino is just the pretty clear pick. Another Sky Whaler shot. There's also a Welding Sparks in the pack. Interesting. Yeah, I suppose I should just take the Welding Sparks. They're very similar cards. I'm just going to take the Sparks just because it is that much more castable for us. Though, honestly, if there wasn't something as good as Welding Sparks, I would have just snapped up the Sky Whaler shot too, just because I think our mana is definitely good enough to be able to cast it at this point. Ooh, there's some business. A Fabrication Module. I do have to give up a second Thriving Rhino for it, but this is definitely worth it. If you like, let's just do a quick scan here of cards that make energy. Remember, it's just whenever you get an energy, it doesn't care where it's from. And we have a lot of cards that make energy in our deck. Dear God, look at this nonsense. All of those cards make energy. Yeah, I think we'll take a fabrication module. Seems good. All right, a blossoming defense. I'm going to take that here. Wayward Giant is shruggable, and blossoming defense is the best combat trick in the set, so we'll take it. All right, here's a Servant of the Conduit. There's also an Ether Meltdown, which is a card I'd actually prefer to run here, but I think the Servant takes the precedent because it makes energy just like the Ether Meltdown does, but it also powers out our 4s and triggers our fabrication module. It's close. Another splash is also just awkward, so I'll go for the Servant here. I've always been super impressed by Servant of the Conduit. I think it's an excellent card. Cool. Another Seed Sculptor. I'll take it. I like having some good early plays in a deck like this. Start applying pressure. I'm going to cut the Handicraft for now. Okay, another Wild Wanderer. Could just take a Glint Sleeve Artisan. It doesn't seem to fit super well in our deck. I don't want another Narnum Cobra or a Spireside Infiltrator. I don't think we don't have any vehicles or anything. I guess I'll just take another Wild Wanderer, though I do wish I had a little something better to spend it on than nothing. Take a Larger Than Life. Card actually seems decent in our deck. Like that thing just powers through a heck of a lot of extra damage. I'm going to take this Accomplished Automaton. We're making a lot of mana. All right, fine. I'll take a second Narnum Cobra if they're going to make me. All right, so let's get this thing slimmed down a little here and see what we're really looking at. Yeah, this deck looks pretty good, actually. I think I am going to play the Cow Prowler, actually. We've got so many ways to hit all of our land drops, and I do want to be a heavy creature deck to make sure that cards like Nature's Way and Blossoming Defense actually do things in the game. We've got some decent stuff to do with our mana late game anyway, so it's not like we're dead here, but you know, we have 2 Wild Wanderers and 2 Attunes. Like, we're hitting all of our land drops and even accelerating at some point, so I kind of like having a 6-drop in the deck to catch those. I think I'm going to go 16 lands with 2 Attunes here, so I do need to make one more cut. It's probably just this. Shades of Shayless Claim's always super mediocre. It could be one of the Narnum Cobras, though. I guess I'll cut a Narnum Cobra. We'll assume that this energy is going to be put to good use with our Deadlock Trap or Multiform Wonder or something like that. All right, we get to play the hub. We need to make sure that we're heavy on forests. We do need to play 1 plains, which is a little bit annoying, but I think we can go 9-5. Oops, combine them. And that way, we've got 9 green sources plus the hub, so 10, to make sure that we can cast Attune with Ethers. And then if we can do that, we can cast anything in our deck. I mean, our red requirement is actually quite low. Yeah, by the way, another possible energy sink there too. Okay, so green, red, a little tiny bit of white, and this is an energy deck. Let's see what it does. All right, so for game number 1, we have a pretty good opening hand here. All 3 of our colors, including our splash card, and a pair of Kujar Seed Sculptors to start things off. So we fire off one of those on turn 2. And I would be happy to trade off here for the Emberall Bruiser, but our opponent doesn't actually attack with it, and they also don't have an artifact, so that works for us. So we decided to use up our mana efficiently here by playing Attune with Ether, getting a land, and then playing the second Kujar Seed Sculptor. We decided not to attack here. We've got good blocks for the 3-2 and the 3-1, so we're just going to sit back as our opponent plays a Propeller Pioneer. We decide here to go ahead and attack. And the reasoning for this is because we have a 2-for-1 in our hand here. If they double block, then we get the 2-for-1 with the shot. And they decide not to block, go to 17, and we just go big and play our 4-4 Trampler. Pay that because it can get over any of the creatures, doesn't trade for any of them. We're going to attack with both for the same reasons as before. We've got 2 big creatures and a removal spell. Our opponent plays that crappy enchantment, but whatever. We just run out a Wild Wanderer, keep our mana flowing, and with 2 removal spells, maybe even 3 in our hand, plus an additional threat, we're looking pretty good here, especially considering our opponent has yet to attack us. This turn, we decide just to punch down the biggest blocker available and attack with everything. This gives us, at worst case, trades, and in best case, it lets us get 2-for-1s with Sky Whaler shot, and try to set up next turn for Spontaneous Artist as well. So things looking pretty good for us here. Our opponent goes for the triple block, which is kind of an interesting block. I kind of like it, actually. And we ended up trading and then trading. Leaves them with 2 creatures and us with 2, bigger creatures. We play a Deadlock Trap, but it gets fragmentized as our opponent then follows up with the big 5-drop. We decide to wait a turn here, as we don't really want to trade our 4-4 for just a 3-2 and a 1-3. So we use our removal spell to take care of the big boy, and we pick up an Ether Torch Renegade here that we can now use. This can be important because we've got the Spontaneous Artist sitting there, and we've got plenty of energy to start throwing around as well. So we get our energy from it, but since it enters the battlefield tap, we just pass the turn back. And now with our opponent at 9 life, we decide to jam with both of our creatures. We've got enough energy with our Ether Torch Renegade to just finish off our opponent if they take either of these hits. And unfortunately for them, they do, and we kill them. For game number 2, we have a pretty nice opener. We make no changes sideboard-wise. We didn't really see much that we wanted to bring it in. So we're going to just start things off once again with a Kujar Seed Sculptor. And this turn, we decide just to get in there and get our guy bounced. So that kind of changes our plan for the turn. But it does let us use our mana perfectly because we get to just replay the Sculptor, go ahead and use Attune with Ether, and then pass the turn back. Our opponent does nothing for the turn, so we start things off with another attack. And we don't really have a reasonable play, so we just pass the turn back. A little bit awkward for us. Our opponent plays a Self-Assembler and goes and finds another one. And this isn't really what you want to be doing, but we don't really have a great way to get through that. So I just go ahead and kill it with my Harness Lightning. And I'm not happy about it, but I do want to clear the way for Multiform Wonder here. And I'm pretty sure that my opponent is just going to line up another Self-Assembler next turn, in which case I can use Welding Sparks on it if I want. So I pass a turn back to my opponent, and sure enough, they play another Self-Assembler, and lucky for us, they only have 2, which is pretty common in this. But so that worked out fine. We Welding Sparks the thing away so that we can get in for a big hit of at least 5 damage, as it turns out, and make it a little bit more than that. And I just go in for the full 7. And then this is the only time when I have a really interesting decision. I can either play Ether Torch Renegade, or I can leave up Blossoming Defense. I decide ultimately that the choice is to leave up Blossoming Defense. I think that our Multiform Wonder is just going to get the job done if it's left unchecked. So I decide to not use my mana efficiently, but instead protect the spell that I think is the most important by keeping Blossoming Defense alive. And my opponent seems to agree as they scoop up the cards in game 2. For match 2, game 1, we have a kind of sketchy hand, just basically a mono green hand, but basically all we need are forests for this hand to go. So I figure it's probably a reasonable keep as we kick things off versus our opponent here. We start off with a Narnum Cobra, and we decide here, well, do we want to try to trade it off or not? Do we want to offer the trade, I should say? And I say, yeah, sure, I'm going to, because the truth of the matter is that I have a big decision here about whether I want to use up my mana efficiently and play a Thriving Rhino, or try to cut my opponent off of their mana ramp spell with that Servant of the Conduit. And, I can do that by using Nature's Way. Our opponent decided not to block, which told me that they really did want to protect this card. And I decided to go ahead and just snap it off. Potentially cutting them off of splashes and ramping out big threats early that I'd have a hard time keeping up with 2 off-color cards in my hand. So my opponent's turn 3 plays pretty tame. It's just a Kujar Seed Sculptor, and that makes our line of play relatively straightforward. The question is, do we want to attack here or not? And I think it's an interesting decision either way. Would we make this trade? Maybe, but against green-red, the Narnum Cobra can do a lot of work, so I decided to keep it back and buy us some time, basically. We've got 2 off-color cards in hand. It's hard for us to get there. Now, I see that my opponent probably would not have blocked and just taken the 2 damage, but whatever. What are you going to do? I play the Spontaneous Artist, give it haste, and get in there. I just go ahead and jam with the whole team here. I'm willing to make any trades that my opponent wants because I want to clear the way for my Rhino. It's exactly what I do. Unfortunately, my opponent has other plans for me with a Wayward Giant, a nice big 5-drop for us to try to get through. And we don't really have the tools to do that right now, but I do get a free attack here. I get to attack with my Rhino to get the +1/+1 counter on it, and my opponent doesn't even block, which is kind of nice. They drop down to 11. That was a big turning point, I think, taking the extra 4 damage when they could have blocked. But I'll take it. After that, I play a Pima Outrider. It gets killed with the ability on the stack, making my choice simple. I'm going to make a Servo. And now my opponent seems to be content to just sort of hold back here. I'm at 1 energy. I need 1 more to get another counter on my guy, but currently I can't do that. Now my opponent starts attacking with the Wayward Giant, which isn't good news for me. And as you can see, there's another Wayward Giant that hits the table as well. Now I get more energy, and I decide to go ahead and attack here. This way, I do end up trading off if my opponent double blocks, but at least I get one of the Giants off the board, which are really tough for me to deal with. And I like getting one of those dead if I can. Now, I still have one of them to deal with as I fall down to 8 and my opponent kills my creature, but boom, right off the top, Ether Hub for the white mana means that even with the trade here, I can use my Skywhaler shot to kill this Wayward Giant and leave myself with just the 1 servo. I decide to put Blossoming Defense on top of my library as it's a spell and it can help protect my servo from going the distance. My thinking is if my opponent doesn't have anything here, then I can actually just Blossoming Defense next turn and win. And if they try to kill my servo, I'll probably just protect it like that. And I draw a removal spell, peck in there for 1 more, go little servo, go. And I actually end up drawing the win here with Kujar Seed Sculptor to put a +1/+1 counter on my servo, which then makes it lethal as I attack in the red zone and pick up the game win. For game 2, I decide to sideboard in Durable Handicraft and a second Narnum Cobra, and I take out 2 of my slower cards, my second Wild Wanderer and a Highspire Artisan. I feel like this matchup could be grindy and creature-based, in which case I want those type of good blockers and other cards. I have to take a mulligan and put a Plains on the bottom here. And this hand ends up being quite slow, though I do keep it. I draw a Blossoming Defense off the top. My opponent has a strong start with Thriving Grubs, and I have no answer for it, at least not immediately. My opponent then follows up with Brazen Scourge and bashes me for 6, and all of a sudden I'm way behind in this game after drawing another 4-drop. And things cascade from there. I fall down to 8. My opponent plays a Weldfast Monitor. Now I finally get to play something. My first spell of the game, a Pima Outrider here, just trying to protect my life total as much as possible. I do decide, though, to put a +1/+1 counter on it as it can block either the Grubs or the Brazen Scourge and maybe help me stabilize. Instead, though, my opponent plays a Haste creature, a Menace creature, and bashes me for the win. All right, well, game 2 didn't go very well, but let's see how game 3 ended up. I get to start off with a nice start with all 3 of my colors and a couple of additional energy, and I've even got a 2-drop into a 3-drop, and then boom, I drew a 4-drop there as well. So things looking pretty good for me here in game 3. My opponent answers also with their own Kujar Seed Sculptor, and I just fire off the Rhino. I decide not to attack with mine. If my Rhino dies, I could take damage. My opponent could very easily block, so I don't attack, although often I will there just bluff the attack. Since sometimes people don't block and you can use that to your advantage. But here I decide not to, as I want to make sure I maintain my life total. My opponent pretty aggressively uses their Harness Lightning to kill my Rhino, but that just frees the way for me to cast the Doorbuster and pass the turn back with 6 energy already in my pool and a Harness Lightning in hand plus the Doorbuster to put the energy into means I have things to do. I got stuff to do with my energy here. My opponent decides just to kill my lesser creature, but that does mean that I get to start bashing for big chunks of damage. Even just 4 from the Doorbuster himself is plenty. And I add another 2 power to the board with my own Servant of the Conduit. I've got Harness Lightning available. I decide to take advantage of the timing here and just kill the Kujar Seed Sculpture, which had 2 counters on it, and make sure my opponent doesn't draw an additional card. This allows me to bash for 6, drop my opponent to 10. Now I'm out of gas, but I've still got 5 energy left, plus a Doorbuster. Right off the top, I draw Nature's Way, and I decide to force the issue by killing the Armorcraft Judge. My opponent can, of course, crew their Sky Skiff, but I have enough energy that I can just make it not be able to block and put them down to 4 and put big time pressure on my opponent, and they scoop them up. All right, we're in the finals, and this is our opening hand. The question is, do we keep it or not? Clearly, we're missing green sources, and we even have 1 green card in our hand. But we've got 2 of our very best cards in the deck with Multiform Wonder and Fabrication Module, probably our best card. And they're both colorless plus a red spell. So the question is, how often do we actually draw the green mana source that we need when we need it? Well, I ran the numbers. I busted out the old hypergeometric calculator, and let's take a look at what it shows. Now, as you can see here, the numbers, of course, get higher the longer we go. With 10 outs in the deck, we have a chance that gradually works its way up from 52% all the way up to 78% by turn 4. And that, of course, leads us to the Servant of the Conduit easily if we want it, and a bunch of other spells in our deck. Now, this is a type of hand that can go awry, but I decide that given that we've already got 2 of our best cards plus a good removal spell in hand, I'm going to keep it. I like my odds there. If we draw a green source by turn 4, that's okay. I think this hand can actually work with that, as we've got stuff to do with our mana anyway. So as the game begins, we start off. Of course, we're on the play, by the way, and I did run the numbers based on that. And yeah, we don't really have much to do here in the early stages, but that's okay. Like I said, we've got a removal spell plus a fabrication module. We decide just to build out the module against an 0-4 defender. That's pretty nice. This is the type of thing that I want to try to do, is set up for a longer game where we can really go off with this fabrication module, and we have cards like Spontaneous Artist that really help us do that. So let's see what we get here. A Narnum Cobra. So still haven't found that green source, but at least we have things to do with our mana. And we're just going to go ahead and main phase Welding Sparks here to make sure that Rhino dies. That thing is a major threat, and we don't want to even take the chance that our opponent gets to untap and kind of get us. Another green spell off the top. It's not really what the doctor ordered, but hey, you know, we took our risks, and we'll take it. Another green spell off the top isn't, again, really what we want, but hey, we've got a lot of spells going, and once we hit that green source, which we unfortunately don't seem to be able to do, we'll be able to just go off. Now, this is pretty good, though, because we get to start bashing right away here, and I just go ahead and attack in with both creatures because, hey, why not? And it even works. They don't block, which I think is really funny because we were completely tapped out. It might have just been a misclick, though. At least it gives us something to do with our mana next turn. Yay, we've got because our guy got bounced, so we're just going to go ahead and replay that once again and make it into a 4-4. We get that energy back as well. No use in attacking this time, though, because the Skygate's now a 1-5, so we're just going to pass a turn back. Still really need that green mana to make this thing go. Our opponent, unfortunately, just played Wildest Dreams on us, and boy, did they get us. So, you know, one thing that we'll want to do is take a note as to which type of cards, or actually specifically which cards they got back, and that way we'll have an idea. And this is the type of thing that you just want to make sure you just write it down or take a quick note to make sure. And boom, right off the top, Ether Hub. That gives us access to green mana. Though, interestingly, upon further reflection here, we have to really decide if we want to start casting these green spells, because we only get to cast one of them, and you know what? It looks like this is actually just better. We get to make energy, we get to make a 4-4, we get to give these guys haste, and we get to bash for really a significant amount of damage here. This is a big attack, and we've even got a pretty nice play here with the Blossoming Defense up just in case. Our opponent ends up chump blocking with the wall, which is certainly a welcome play for us, and they've got the Rhino, one of the cards that they got back with the Wildest Dreams, and then they even follow it up with a 2-drop here as well, an Ether Theorist. We draw a double green spell. Still haven't actually drawn a forest somehow, but yeah, so it goes. And now we have to decide how we want to approach this turn. Our opponent has 2 blue mana up, and we're going to go for Servant of the Conduit. What Servant of the Conduit does is it gives us energy, and it makes it so that our Multiform Wonders even bigger, and it also lets us cast green spells next turn, even something like Cal Prowler if we really want. This is a pretty interesting position here as well, because now we can actually line up a massive attack. So I give my guy flying. The opponent, of course, has the select for inspection. We knew about that, but I have a pretty tricky play. I can give my Servant of the Conduit haste, tap it for Blossoming Defense, and then use up a bunch of energy to get in a huge hit of damage here. Our opponent's at 13 life, and even after chump blocking, we go ahead and activate to get in for even more damage. And as you can see, we attack for 12 and get them to 1, putting up 3 lethal threats and really forcing our opponent to have something which they don't. All right, for sideboarding, I decided to bring in the Durable Handicraft again. It could be a grindy matchup and take out the very slow Highspire Artisan versus this slow deck. Keep a pretty reasonable opener with double green, double red, and some spells. I think that seems fine. Our opponent has a Consulate Skygate once again, and we just don't really have much going on early, but our opponent, their deck really isn't designed to punish us for that. So we get to just play our third land and pass the turn, see if we find a target for one of our removal spells. We don't, but that's okay. We're going to run out the Pima Outrider here, make it into a 4/4, and then assume that it's going to be able to start attacking through this Consulate Skygate once it's reasonable to do so. We could consider making a servo, but it wouldn't actually let our guy get through, so I think just making a 4/4 is better. We have a clean attack here, attack for 4 damage. That's a nice hit. I'm pretty happy to get that. And then we decide just to use up our mana efficiently once again, grabbing our Plains with the Tunith Ether and playing a Malphas Doorbuster to help push through a bunch of damage later. Hunt the Weak takes down the Doorbuster with the help of the Dukara Peafowl, which is definitely annoying here, but we've still got good attacks. We've got a Trampler. We can use the Harness Lightning or the Welding Sparks to finish off whatever blocks, and our opponent sees through it and just takes it, but they are getting a little low on life here, already down to 12 after a couple of big hits from the Pima Outrider. This way, by the way, we get to leave up Harness Lightning and play our 4-mana spell. Opponent gets pretty aggressive here and attacks in for 3. We take the hit kind of eagerly. I'm quite happy to take that hit. And boom, we draw Fabrication Module, honestly one of our best cards. And I attack with both. I'd play it first because I can use it as a combat trick. I can use it to threaten getting through that wall with my Wild Wanderer and try to dissuade my opponent from actually making the block here. As it turns out, they do make the block, and I just say, you know what? That's fine. You're going to go ahead and select for inspection my creature. I want to make sure that I leave my mana available so I can recast that creature, and I just go ahead and do that. My opponent doesn't take any damage that turn, but still they had to use select for inspection in a pretty suboptimal spot. And then, I see, you have Metallurgic Summonings. This makes sense, but with the shields down, we go for a pretty aggressive line here of just killing both of their creatures and attacking for a massive hit, leaving us with 2 lethal threats on the battlefield, both of them 4 power, our opponent falling down to 4 life here. We're really asking a lot of our opponent. We're forcing them to react to us in a pretty meaningful way, and if they can't, then they lose, and if they can, then we've got pretty reasonable backup plans here as well, with both Durable Handicraft and Fabrication Module to kind of power us into the late game. We're going to kick things off with the Deadlock Trap. The reason we play this pre-combat is because it gives us an additional +1/+1 counter in case our opponent has some scary spell that they can use to create a huge blocker. So now we have 2 5-powered creatures, and we attack with both of them once again to just force the issue as hard as we can against our opponent. Now they can have any number of instants here, though, to help them survive or maybe not to lose on the spot, but still it's going to be very difficult to get through this. And it turns out it's Ether Trade Winds to put our Pima Outrider back in hand and give them a blocker, though it's not a sufficient blocker, and they end up chumping, untapping, and scooping. We won the draft. All right, so taking a look at the deck and just sort of reviewing things, this is a pretty classic cab-style deck. This is a cards that affect the board state style deck. If you look through, there's really only one card that doesn't meet the criteria of being a combat trick, a removal spell, or a creature, and that's a Fabrication Module, and that card is so powerful that you're pretty happy to do it, and maybe you could argue that it's a combat trick. I wouldn't, but maybe you could, but look through the rest of the list. Every card in there affects the board in some meaningful way, and that gives you a good shot. That is a good, solid foundation from which to build a limited deck, and it ended up working out for us on this one. Hopefully you learned something. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we'll see you on the next depth check here from Limited Resources.